Could I speak with the Reverend Whitwell Elwin, please?
In 1644 to 1647, there was Matthew Hopkins who terrorised the country, a self-appointed witch-finder general.
Was that you? Was that somebody here trying to get my attention?
So this is the door that I heard opening, but we know that we closed this early and we've bolted it from the inside, so I'm just checking.
Now there's been reports that you've been seen inside the church. Did you see a shadow, Jeff?
That door just moved.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I've been
sir.
poisoned. Manufactured
Yes, sir.
record.
Yes, sir.
Go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here we go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here we go.
It's like a light is in my face, but I can't fall for you. I close my eyes and drift away. I've overdosed on you. Cause then you wake up dead one day.
With its tall towers reaching for the sky, you can only but admire this beautiful cathedral. And to think that the man that built this had no training in design, architecture or construction. In fact, it took him 24 years to build until his death. The cathedral was built on a site of a previous church which was used for witchcraft trials. Eventually, it was torn down as local villagers were afraid and believed it to be cursed. Elizabeth Bradwell was executed in 1645 for making wax images of people she disliked, impaling the face with nails, which is said to give the victim a slow and painful death, and then signing a so-called devil's book in her own blood. She even confessed to witchcraft at her trial, and she was hanged in the graveyard by Witchfinder General Hopkins. Matthew Hopkins, the self-appointed Witchfinder General, terrorised the country between 1644 and 1647. Hopkins was born in Great Wynnum, Suffolk, in 1619. As the son of a Puritan vicar, he was very much raised in the church. Although the condemnation of witches wasn't a new practice, the turn of the 15th century saw the church amp up its vigour to prosecuting suspected witches. Hopkins was responsible for over 300 deaths. In 1849, Whitwell Elwin, a descendant of Pocahontas, began the construction of the cathedral in the fields in the original place that the church once stood, and it would take 24 years to build. Before the church was fully built, the chancel began to sink into the vaults below, the vaults of Elwin's own family, including 3 of his own children. Fountain, Hastings Philip, and Francis. He was then tasked at retrieving the rotting bodies of his own loved ones and reburying them, before underpinning the chancel arch and western towers. Elwin not only raised the funds for the building, he also designed it without the help of an architect, borrowing details from other churches throughout the country. Some of his models can be identified. The west doorway was inspired by Glastonbury Abbey, but the slender twin towers which soar over the wide East Anglian landscape and the central pinnacle, which looks almost like a minaret, seem to have been sprung solely from his own imagination. The result is a masterpiece. Inside, he filled his fairy tale creation with angels, all modelled on the rector's female friends. The wooden carved angels holding up the roof are the work of James Minns, a well-known master carver. The coloured stained glass windows also show angels as a series of musicians with flowing hair and pretty faces. Edwin Lutyens, the distinguished architect who married the daughter of one of Elwin's oldest friends, said the church was very naughty but built in the right spirit. You may love the church, you may be outraged by it, but you cannot remain unmoved by such an exuberant oddity. Reverend Elwin's wife, Emma Louisa, died on the 22nd of February 1898, and he performed the service in his church. The next morning, Whitwell Elwin died suddenly and is buried beside his wife in the churchyard. The church closed its doors and became redundant in 1987. The reports of this location are that Reverend Whitwell Elwin has been seen inside the church. Also, a black figure wanders the graveyard and inside the church, believed to be that of Elizabeth Bradwell, the self-confessed witch. Unexplained noises and footsteps are also heard inside the church. During our daytime walkthrough of the location, we were hearing movement in the chancel, so we set up several devices within the chancel at the end of the cathedral. We place a REM pod, a K2 meter, a digital recorder, and a paralight. We have our static cams in place, covering all areas. So here we are at the Cathedral of Fields. This has been a delayed investigation, so we're glad everything's gone to the way we wanted it to. were all set up this evening. So this place, it's like St Paul's Cathedral. It's like it just sits in the middle of the countryside. It was built in the 1800s by Reverend Whitwell Irwin, who had no idea on building or construction. And this place is absolutely fantastic. It's huge. Also in the 1600s, Hopkins Witchfinder General. This is where they held the trials. In fact, it was another small church that once sat here, and this huge cathedral has now been built, over the top. And Elizabeth Bradwell, self-confessed witch, was hung here and buried. Now, Reverend Elwin is said to be seen here, and he's outside, buried in a grave with his wife. As I speak about Reverend Elwin that is seen inside the church and mention that he is buried outside with his wife, we receive an EVP saying, "I am." Here is the audio taken from my digital recorder with enhancements. Reverend Elwin is said to be seen here, and he's outside, buried in a grave with his wife. Reverend Elwin is said to be seen here, and he's outside, buried in a grave with his wife. Footsteps and noises are heard, and also the apparition of Elizabeth Bradwell the witch is also seen. So, as I say, we're all set up, very, very quiet, and we're ready to start the investigation. Within seconds, we receive another EVP saying, "I hear them." Again, here is the enhanced audio. The apparition of Elizabeth Bradwell the witch is also seen. So, as I say, we're all set up, very, very quiet. The apparition of Elizabeth Bradwell the witch is also seen. So, as I say, we're all set up, very, very quiet. With only minutes into the investigation, something is moving in the chancel at the far end of the cathedral.
Phil? I heard a noise up there, didn't you?
Movement from the end of the cathedral. Did you hear that?
I did hear it, yeah. It's coming from the chancel, wasn't it?
Can you hear us down there?
Movement.
We just heard you move several times. Can you tell us your name, please?
Still movement down there.
You can still hear movement.
Yeah, very, very faint, but there is movement down there. And again.
A loud noise comes from inside the chancel. Here is the audio enhanced.
You can still hear movement.
Yeah, very, very faint, but there is movement down there. And again.
You can still hear movement.
Yeah, very, very faint, but there is movement down there. And again.
Hello? Hello there. My name's Jeff. And my friend here is Phil. We just heard you move and make a noise. Can you tell us your name, please? If you can't tell us your name, can you make another noise? Maybe knock on something, tap on something? Was that?
That was a tap.
Which was just over here. Thank you.
I ask if whoever is there to knock or tap on something, and we get a response as we hear a knock next to us, which comes from the pulpit. Here is the audio with enhancements.
Can you make another noise? Maybe knock on something, tap on something? Can you make another noise? Maybe knock on something, tap on something? Was that?
That was a tap.
Which was just over here. Thank you.
All seemed quiet and nothing more was heard, so we made our way to the other end of the cathedral.
Could I speak with the Reverend Whitwell Elwyn, please? This is you, up here. The reason why I want to speak to you, Reverend Elwyn, is about this wonderful building you designed. It's such a feat of engineering, particularly as you were self-taught and really had no previous experience. To bring together all these different types of architect and put them all together, it's like no other building, no other church which I've been in. So let me introduce myself. My name is Philip. Could you let me know that you can hear me, please? There's quite a bit of history which is known about this place. I know from what I've read that when you first started building, that you had problems in the where the arch is, and you started to have subsidence, and the building started to sink into, very sadly, the graves or the crypt which was underneath. Is it true that you had members of your family in that crypt and you had to take their bodies and move them elsewhere? Now I've read their names. You had 3 children down there. You had Fountain, Hastings Philip, and Francis. Tell me about them. Tell me about them now. I can hear you down there in the chancel.
As Phil is speaking to Reverend Elwin, again there are unexplained sounds and movement coming from within the chancel.
I can hear you down there in the chancel. I can hear you down there in the chancel. I think Jeff told you why we were here. We want to find out more about how you came up with the ideas for this place, how you built it, how long it took. We're not here to cause you any trouble. Not here to harm anybody. It's just interest. You're obviously a very educated man. Now, the way I'm talking may sound unfamiliar to you. I suppose as time goes on, people's accents and the way we talk changes. If I'm not addressing you with the respect which you deserve, please accept my apologies. Now this device I'm holding in my hand will record your voice. If you come down and talk into where the red light is, it will enable us to hear you. So did you see a shadow, Jeff? Up there. If I hold this out in front of me, would you be able to come and talk into it and tell me your name, please? Just to confirm I'm speaking to the right person. You may notice that on the pews, if that's the right term for that type of pew, there's some things which are lit up. They potentially could help us.
Footsteps behind me.
What was that, Jeff? Footsteps behind you.
Yeah. Heard about 4 or 5, something walking by.
Footsteps are heard coming from the opposite end of the cathedral, and these footsteps are captured on our Static Cam 1, where they are the loudest. Here is the audio taken from Static Cam 1.
There's some things which are lit up. They potentially could help us. There's some things which are lit up. They potentially could help us.
So hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there was a church here, much smaller than what's been put now in its place. And in 1644 to 1647, there was Matthew Hopkins, who terrorised the country, a self-appointed witch-finder general. And the church that was here before, that's when they held the trials. And in 1645, they brought Elizabeth Bradwell here. And she confessed to being a witch. And what she used to do was make wax or clay figures and put nails in them, curse the person, bury this figure so they couldn't break the curse. And
Jeff, there's just noises coming from behind. It was like a knock on a door. There you go.
where did that come from?
From the door.
As I am telling the story of Elizabeth Bradwell, a self-confessed witch who was executed here, Phil hears banging, which seems to be coming from the main door to the cathedral. Here is the enhanced audio.
Bury this figure so they couldn't break the curse. And
Jeff, there's just noises coming from behind. It was like a knock on a door. There you go.
bury this figure so they couldn't break the curse. And
Jeff, there's just noises coming from behind. It was like a knock on a door. There you go. Open the door.
So Elizabeth Bradwell was brought here, and she confessed to being a witch. And there's more knocking, and there's more knocking again. And she confessed to being a witch. And there's more knocking, and there's more knocking again. And she confessed to being a witch. And there's more knocking, and there's more knocking again. Is that on the walls? Every time I mention the name Elizabeth Bradwell. So she was hung on a tree and buried. But that would have been outside of the original small church. But this church is so big that the tree and where she was buried would be inside this cathedral. Okay. Elizabeth, they say they see you inside and outside this church. Are you here? Can you hear us? They tore down the original church that was here because the locals were scared and you cursed it. That's why it was demolished. And then Reverend Elwin built this cathedral. So Elizabeth, can you do something so we know that you are here, please? Elizabeth Bradwell. Can you shout out, please, so we can hear you? Are the That door just moved. The door down the bottom just moved. Did you hear that?
I certainly heard a noise coming from down there.
The door just moved.
We hear the sound of the door, which is located in the chancel, open, as seen here on Static Cam 4.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to make our way round the cathedral, and we're going to go round to where Elwin is buried, Reverend Elwin and his wife, Emma Louise. We have secured this door. You can't get in, you need a code to get in. All the cameras are still rolling, so if anything happens, we're going to get that on film. Just while we're out here, Phil, I just want to go round to that little side door which we had locked, which I thought had opened earlier because I could hear the door opening. I just want to make sure that it is actually locked. So this is the door that I heard opening. But we know that we closed this early and we've bolted it from the inside, so I'm just checking. That is well secure. That's not moving. That's the door that I heard opening earlier on. Okay, so Emma Louise's and Reverend Elwin's grave is just along here.
Okay, I'm standing outside the church in the graveyard, and this is the family grave, I suppose, of Reverend Elwin and his wife, Emma Louise. Nothing odd about that at all, I guess. Reverend Elwin, when I came here before, I hunted round and round the graveyard, and it was actually quite difficult to find your grave because the stones are so very worn. But I eventually found it, and this is where you and your wife and other members of your family are buried. Now, there's been reports that you've been seen inside the church. Are you able to wander freely around the grounds and into the church? One of the reasons why we do this is because in this day and age, faith is quite a hard thing. There's so many people pushing you away from it. Hence, empty churches like the one you built. But it would be nice to know that there is something for us after we die. Are you able to give us some glimpse, perhaps?
At this point, whilst Phil and I are outside, there is movement and voices coming from inside the cathedral. Remember, there is no way anyone could be inside as we have locked the door, and the only way to gain access is via an electronic code which we have been given.
I'm stood here in the pulpit now. It's a strange feeling. When you think that the number of sermons where the different reverends would have got up here and preached to their flock would have been crowded, people would have been singing, people would have been praying. It's quite sad, really, to see an empty church. But it's still here. It still stands as a symbol of people's beliefs, both now and in the past. Now, we've been asking if there's anybody here, any spirits here that would be able to speak to us. And we have received knocking. We have received noises. We've heard footsteps. I'd like to thank you for that. One of the other things which has happened to me since we've been here, it's happened 4 times. And to be truthful, initially, I didn't really give it any thought. It was only when it happened the last time, during the last session in here, that it seemed a little bit odd. What happened was, on my left hand, I was getting a hot spot. It felt, it wasn't like a warm draft or anything like that. The only way I can describe it is if you were to push your hand close to a candle, not actually touch it, but close to it, you get a very localized, warm sensation. Not burning, but a warm sensation. And it happened roughly in the same place on 4 occasions. As I say, initially, I didn't really think much of it. Was that you? Was that somebody here trying to get my attention?
Phil receives a response. It is either someone shouting or screaming at him. Here is the enhanced audio.
Was that you? Was that somebody here trying to get my attention? Was that you? Was that somebody here trying to get my attention?
Even though we carried out a session within the chancel where we were hearing voices and movement, the location all fell silent. So we concluded our investigation at the Cathedral of Fields.